Hello, everyone, and welcome to the call. My name is Marni Penner, and I'm a social anxiety survivor and a social anxiety and anxiety coach. And on this call, I'm going to talk about exactly how I overcame my crippling social anxiety. I found the solution of honesty, love, and acceptance. And this week, I realized that I actually dyed my hair a bright pink purple right about at the time as I found my solution to social anxiety. And this is significant. And I continued to dye my hair during the following 2 years, off and on. And I really do believe it was significant in me being able to implement this solution for social anxiety. And so in this talk, I'm going to talk about what the solution was and why my pink purple hair helped me. Okay, so when I was 21 years old, suddenly I became terrified of my best friend. We were sitting in a cafe, and suddenly I couldn't look her in the eye. My heart rate was just beating like you wouldn't believe, there was some sort of emergency. I had all these intrusive thoughts, and I couldn't focus on anything she was saying. Like, it was really disturbing. I didn't know what was happening to me. I was just suddenly terrified of her. And of course, because this event was so disturbing, I then, within the span of a few days, I became terrified of absolutely everybody. Um, I also could no longer read. I got performance anxiety, and there was no way that I could actually comprehend what I was reading. And so I got both this crippling social anxiety and performance anxiety kind of like overnight. Um, I went to the psychology clinic at the University of Montreal, and I started seeing a CBT therapist. And unfortunately, she was really bad. Maybe she had recently graduated. She seemed to have anxiety herself. She was very stiff. And she kept focusing on my intrusive thoughts, focusing on my symptoms, and basically making it worse. She wasn't being honest about herself. She was just really, really bad, right? And then I tried switching to another one who was even worse because she didn't say a whole thing, a word throughout the call. I don't know what approach that was supposed to be, but so the therapy was really, really bad. So I dropped out of university, and I went back to the small town near Calgary where my parents were living. And I saw yet a third therapist, but she was nice, but she didn't help me at all. And I had to drug myself just to get through the workday. Like, it was just really, really brutal, like extreme panic all the time near people, even with my family members. Um, so I went to Europe to be a nanny, and then I managed to go back to university, living in my parents' basement in Calgary. And then I thought, like, there's no way that I'm going to be making any progress. Like, I was getting through my courses with extreme anxiety, right? Like, nothing was changing. Nothing was going to change in my parents' basement. So I said, I got to do something crazy, like really crazy, because nothing else is going to work. I was envisioning my whole life, going to be that my whole life was going to be like this. Like, nothing was even close to looking like it was going to work. So I decided I'm going to learn one of the hardest languages in the world. They said that was Hungarian. It was in Eastern Europe on the other side of the former Iron Curtain. So I knew it was going to be interesting. And so I found a language school where I could learn Hungarian, and they had a student residence. So I thought, that's just so easy, and it's going to be surrounded by people my age rather than being a nanny, which was with children. So I bought an impulse plane ticket, and just, right at the beginning of September, and like 3 weeks later, I was off, and I was starting language courses like the day after I arrived. In the student residence, I had a choice. I could be in a room with 2 students or 3 students to a room. And so I chose 3 students to a room, because that way the other 2 could talk with each other and I could just listen, right? It just seemed less threatening as just one other person. Like, that seemed very, very scary. So I picked a room with three of us, 2 other girls. And the wonderful thing was that I belonged. There was all these people coming in and out of my room because they met their friends would come, their classmates would come. And suddenly here I was socializing and watching myself socialize. And I thought, I'm kind of a nice person. Like, I actually saw that I had some good traits socially. Like, maybe I wasn't that horribly flawed of a person. And then one of the friends that came regularly into the room was this Hungarian guy from Serbia. And him and I started talking with each other. We really kind of clicked. Like, we had a very similar personality, but he had no social anxiety at all. And he was very good at making friends. And so him and I started taking these really long walks, and he started teaching me about Hungarian honesty. And I remember him always saying the word honesty in Hungarian, like again and again and again. He's like, this is honesty. This is our Hungarian honesty, right? And so he was honest about absolutely everything about himself, what he was feeling, what he was thinking. And he encouraged me to do the same. And what I noticed was that when I was honest about what I was thinking, what I was feeling, my anxiety in the moment would go down. And it was such an amazing feeling, like having had this crippling anxiety for so long. Um, and then I thought to myself, I'm leaving, in about 2 months. Like, I stayed there for 8 months. Here's my chance. I've met this honesty guy. Like, I, I'm going to tell him everything. I'm going to tell him all of my secrets, all the things I would never want anyone to know. And I started telling him my secrets. And see, I had a lot of shame at the root of my social anxiety. I see social anxiety as being a shame problem. I was ashamed about my personality. I was nothing like what women were supposed to be. I had shame about my appearance. I wasn't visual, and I had no idea what to do about fashion. I just looked horrible, like really horrible fashion. I had social anxiety with men due to my body image shame. So I had shame that I wasn't dating. I'd never dated. Like, I just felt so flawed. And so I just told him everything that I would never want to tell anyone. And the wonderful thing was that he always replied with something like, oh yeah, me too. I have, and he would give a similar story about himself. Or he said, or he said, I know someone who has a similar problem. Or I think that's pretty common actually. Or, or he'd say something like, well, you could actually improve your fashion if you just wore skirts. Then you'd look more feminine, and then I think you would more achieve your goals. And like, so just very basic things to get me out of my paralysis of shame, right? And so he helped me free myself from the root shames at the core of my social anxiety, which made me feel better and better about myself. Like, here was this guy who was a lot like me, and I liked him, and he seemed to like me. And I thought, well, and I saw myself reflected back from him. I said, maybe I'm not that bad of a person. Maybe I'm kind of cool. Maybe my personality is okay. And so as I was freeing myself from this shame, I started realizing that I actually really love people. I love everyone in the residence. Maybe I love, everyone I meet, basically. Like, maybe my fear was actually love flipping into fear. Maybe I actually really, really love people, but it was too intense, so it was flipping into fear. So I then realized that if I loved people and I dared to show them I loved them, and if I was honest with them, my anxiety went down. So I remember making the realizations that love and honesty are stronger than fear. And if I and I was going to dare to love them and be honest with them. And if they rejected me, so be it. Okay. So I realized love and honesty were stronger than fear, and that I was going to dare to risk rejection from now on. And now I realized that me dyeing my hair pinkish purple happened about at that same time. And so I think there were two reasons for me doing this. The one was to actually provoke rejection. Instead of being so scared that people were going to reject me for random reasons, let's provoke it. Let's give them a reason to reject me, right? So it was like so it was a kind of exposure therapy, rejection therapy, combined into this love and honesty approach, right? Okay, people reject me. Now you have a real reason, right? But I'm going to love you and be honest with you anyway. I think a second reason why I dyed my hair pinkish purple was to own my weirdness. See, I had so many things about me that were weird, right? My personality was a minority personality type, a very intense introvert. My appearance was weird. My fashion was weird. It was weird that I hadn't dated yet, and I was 26 years old, right? So I had a lot of things about me that were weird, and so this made me feel uncomfortable in public in general. So it was one thing that I had now connected with this guy who was like me, but what about everyone else who was not like me, right? This feeling of wishing I could fit in, wishing I was like other people, wishing I wasn't so different, right? So I think that by dyeing my hair pinkish purple, I was owning my weirdness. I was taking control of my weirdness. I was saying, instead of feeling powerless that I'm so weird and there's nothing I can do about it, I'm going to claim the power. I'm going to take back the power. I'm going to say, I'm going to choose my weirdness. I'm going to wear it right on top of my head, right? Yes, I'm weird, and I'm choosing to be weird. And, and all the other weird things about me are actually quite insignificant compared to this bright pink purple hair, right? So then I went back to Calgary, and this approach worked. I made friend after friend after friend. I remember 2 close friends that I made in Calgary that next year, right? And now these were Hungarians in Calgary, so I still had to learn how to be honest and authentic with Canadians, but this solution was working, right? And I remember I would dye my hair off and on. I also did really wacky blonde highlights combined into my red hair as well, but it was definitely a technique to keep me applying love and honesty and keep me remembering to own my weirdness and to risk rejection. Okay, so that is how I overcame my crippling social anxiety. Um, I would like to go back over my story, and I'm going to point out 3 types of honesty that I applied in my solution to overcoming my crippling social anxiety. So the first was deep honesty, which is about the things we don't want to tell anybody, our secrets. This represents the deepest flaws at the root of our social anxiety. And so we have to find someone, who is like us, who's going to understand us and tell them our secrets so that we can free ourselves from this deepest shame. Right. And this is how I help my clients. My clients tend to be very similar to me. So by them being honest with me and me being honest with them, I can help free them from this deepest shame. The next level of honesty is honesty in the moment about what we're feeling and thinking, right? So now this type of honesty is what I was noticing immediately, that when just a sec, I'm just gonna look at I don't know what's causing the beeping. Anyway, it might be you guys asking questions. Can you guys see how I am a very highly sensitive person, right? Like this beeping, while like totally distracting to me. Like, so we can overcome social anxiety even if we are very, very highly sensitive, right? This honesty, love, and acceptance technique, it works even when we're like so high on the highly sensitive person scale. Okay, so honesty in the moment is exactly what I'm doing right now. I'm being honest with you guys that I'm distracted by the beeps, right? Instead of pretending that I'm not hearing the beeps, I'm being honest that I hear the beeps. And by being honest about hearing the beeps, my anxiety went down, right? I actually got to demonstrate it. I love that. Okay. Okay, and so honesty in the moment can depend on the situation. So if we're at work, we might just say something like, I'm having a bad day. If we're with a friend, we're like, oh my gosh, I feel so ashamed for what happened in the store just now, right? But do you see how in both of these circumstances, we're being honest about our emotional state? We're not pretending to be happier than we are. We're not pretending to be in a different mood than we are, or to be thinking about something that we're not, right? We're being honest about what's on our mind in the moment. The third type of honesty is owning our weirdness, owning our differences, owning our story. So that was like me dyeing my hair pinkish purple. I've had clients who grew a really long Mexican mustache to own their ethnicity. I've had people, finally go into the fashion they want to wear, have the haircut they want to have. It can be a physically owning our weirdness. It can also be verbally owning our weirdness. Like, I'm an introvert. I have social anxiety. I don't say much. I'm quiet. Um, I have social anxiety with men, so I can't talk with men, so I've never dated. Right? Like, instead of being so ashamed of it, I've never dated because I have social anxiety with men. I can't talk with men, right? So that's an example of owning. We can own our weirdness either physically or verbally. So that's 3 types of honesty, and that is so interesting. I got to demonstrate it right in the call. And honesty is so complex. And so I help my clients free themselves from the deepest shame by using the deep honesty. I help them apply honesty in the moment because it's very intricate, right? Like all situations require kind of a different kind of honesty in order to help us relieve our anxiety. And then how they can own their shames, figuring what things are they ashamed of that make them different, and how can they own it, right? And so that's how I help my clients use honesty to free themselves from the shame at the root of their social anxiety. Okay, so I'm going to check to see if there's any questions. What I might do to make people more comfortable is stop the recording, and I'll go back to the table setting, and then you can ask your questions either in the chat box or in the or unmute yourself and come ask your questions right in the call.